Okay, so welcome to Engineering Enterprise Trust and Commercial Authority, the 8-week technical ascent to the AI Integrity Group Joint Advisory Partnership. Today, I've got doing. So to start off with, I'll break down exactly what the idea is with the one-to-one fellowship, right? Ideally, this is more than a code review or an operational onboarding ramp. We're looking at things from a space where we don't want to do things according to the traditional education, which is basically isolated learning, generic certifications, and standalone code building, which is usually the processes that a lot of organizations go through in regards to their training. But what we want to be able to do is train our members and our community up through live mentorship like this so that it's much easier to take in. We will also do a video course as well, a discovery call in regards to asking questions or just being updated on any changes that have been made in the course. So yeah, the one-to-one elite fellowship is intentionally designed as a rigorous technical proving ground where your code base is the test. The ultimate outcome is not just certification, but an active contracting role under the AIG. So as we've mentioned before, our goal here is not just to give people your certification that you get from like your IAPPs, etc. We really just want to get people straight into active work whereby it really validates the certification that they're getting and the time that they're putting into the educational process and filling in the skill gap of becoming an architect or consultant. We've got a discount at the moment. So when you check our masterclass, you'll see that discount there. And this is essentially the process where we will do the technical hardening, going through the technical stuff and going through the repetitions that we need to go through to get you ready when the time comes, and everything will be done on the TAIGA platform, which is going to be your main base and your main workspace in terms of all the work that you're going to be doing. So the next stage is the phase 2 of this process. We've got a large database of clients, a pipeline of clients that we have access to that are always looking for consultations, that are always looking for technical work to be done within the company in terms of governance, risk, and compliance. There are no career pathways at the present moment, and essentially there is not even an entry level to this at the moment. So we're trying to build that process and create entry level work for people who are essentially have the skill set to come in, join our community, use our software and our tools, learn our processes, which have been tried and tested already. So you're not just going out there into the market. Even long term, if you do decide you want to set up your own boutique consultancy, or you just want to work as a solopreneur doing consultancy work via freelancing opportunities that are available in the market at the moment, then that would be your choice as well. So it's the 3-phase architectural model. So phase 1 of this process would be sessions 1 to 2, and this will include code base ingestion, environmental baselining, and data provenance. Phase 2 of this process will be going through runtime and guardrails. Sessions 3 to 5. So that's our human in the loop controls, policy as code execution, and adversarial red teaming. And then the last phase of this will be the commercial vanguard, which will be session 6 to 8. And this is where we literally give you all our AIG audit playbooks. You get pre-negotiated client matchmaking and partnership graduation, where essentially you start working on a client account and I will shadow you through the initial processes, just basically to get you set up and started and to understand exactly what your role is. So throughout phases 1 and 2, I will be working directly with you in your workspace or your environment to snap these enterprise grade security interceptors into your existing architecture. So what that basically means is I will be going through the process of showing you the tech stack, how the tech stack works, how to understand breaking it down into cryptographic registries like the NIST RMF and EU AI Act compliance. I'll also be going through policy as code control plane, which will be what helps you mitigate prompt injections and drift. And then we will finally go through the HITL telemetry, which would route edge cases to human review. And that's the final process where you basically combine all these processes to create a human review that basically breaks down what the software's already done. And then you can put it all together as a review for the client. And whenever they need that review, you send one through, or whenever we've agreed to provide them with the reviews, we send those through. The next stage would be, so session one, like I've mentioned before, is the onboarding and technical ingestion. I will talk more about this in terms of, so my instructor action lists would require me to review software layers and training code, map vector databases and API dependencies, establish baseline security posture, and then the initial risk and architecture topology map, where we will find the foundational schematics of the systems and vulnerabilities and integrations. So the next phase would be session two, which would be the architectural integrity and model provenance. In this section, I will be helping you audit ingestion points against EU AI Act, NIST RMF parameters. We'll also be embedding model versioning across fine-tuning pipelines. We'll deploy cryptographic registry checkpoints, and then the data provenance and model lineage verification ledger, which is basically an immutable, cryptographically secured record of your model's data history and built to withstand the regulatory scrutiny. So that would be session two, just making sure you understand the architectural integrity and model provenance. Section three is the human in the loop processes and controls and escalation that we spoke about earlier. In this process, we will be making sure that the AI decision pathway provides us with a low confidence threshold so that we can always make sure that in any scenario, we always have decision makers who can make the best possible decision. Session four will be the policy as code runtime architecture. In this process, we will be looking at embedding governance directly into the CI/CD pipelines. We'll also be looking at implementing deterministic runtime filters, securing against prompt injections and model drift. So essentially, the live policy as code control plane, which you find in TAIGA, this is where you will learn how to essentially understand what the processes are in regards to how TAIGA works as a policy as code and runtime architecture. And then this will give you a much easier understanding of, this will give you a better understanding of how the governance successfully gets hard-coded and deployed into your production processes, right? So essentially, this is a very important stage in the process of understanding exactly how we go from that policy as code to a continuous governance infrastructure. And then as we move on into session five, we'll be looking at custom model security auditing and the penetration review. So in this process, we'll be looking at the hallucination risks, permission breaches, and adversarial prompts. So the instructor actions in this scenario would be to execute custom security audits on live code base and then aggressively red team model layers. So we will go through that process together of executing security audits on a live code base and initiating an aggressive red team through multiple model layers. And then this can allow us to essentially create a custom security and vulnerability audit report, which then can complete the documentation of the system resilience and final remediation states. So basically, what that would be is just essentially the process of how you go about creating vulnerability audit report for the client and basically being able to give them. And like I said, this is all dependent on the scenario. So depending on what type of client you got on board, and each industry has its own processes that you have to go through. And then in section 6, we'll be mastering the TAIGA methodology, which is essentially the lead intake. So this is how this is basically our playbook on how we get leads in, take the lead through the process of understanding our architecture baseline, walking them through the TAIGA audit framework, and then the remediation workflow. So ideally, what we want to be doing at this stage is we want to be understanding how to unveil the proprietary AI Integrity Group real world client engagement playbooks, because this is what is going to really now set you apart from most consultants out there in terms of being able to go out there and set up your own consultancy, basically using our processes that have already been tried and tested, that you can now then go and start implementing and building your own consultancy. And essentially, this is all about empowerment. Like I said, the idea with what we're doing at the AI Integrity Group, working as a charity and being able to offer people the opportunity to work with us and our partners. We've worked very hard to build a massive partner network where we get constant work from them. And now that the EU AI Act is going to be dropping in a few days, on August the 2nd, the workload is just going to go up probably times 100, to be honest with you. I can only imagine at this point. And this is why we're in the process of trying to recruit at the moment. We're hiring left, right, and center. We're training and trying to provide everyone who joins as an architect and does our certification and goes through this fellowship and the joint advisory partnership can get to a point where they are established and can put themselves in a position where they are recognized within this space through our network. And then the next stage will be session 7, which will be the client-led matchmaking and proposal engineering. This is when we will be looking at reviewing the service positioning and advisory offerings, right? So we would look at breaking down exactly how our service is positioned and your service would be positioned and what advisory offerings you can offer, what makes the most sense for you moving forward in terms of whatever client base or client opportunities are available within your area. For example, let's say you are based in the States and the rules for the States and the EU are very different at the moment. The States predominantly uses NIST RMF, although if the business is in America and it's a global business that also functions in the EU, the EU AI Act will definitely be part of that process in terms of needing to be able to be governed. So for example, let's say yourself being in America right now, if you decided you wanted to just focus on, let's say, maybe local businesses or businesses within the state that you are at the moment, this is where we'd be looking at what type of positioning and advisory offerings you can specifically offer those people, right? Because the one thing people don't understand is it all really boils down to how you want to start. You can start small and grow, or you can just start going straight for the big fish. Ideally, I would always start small, locally, looking into your networks, business owners that you already know. Because like I said, a lot of businesses are already using AI, and a lot of businesses don't really understand governance. They don't understand risk and compliance. They don't understand the importance of governance when using AI. So that would be where you come in and you position yourself and say, look, I completely understand what you guys are trying to do. But to be honest with you, moving forward, I think you definitely need to be considering what your governance processes are going to look like, because as regulations continue to tighten over the next few months, especially in the EU, they could be looking at massive fines of up to 8% annual revenue, which for big companies, that's a lot of money. So that would be session 7. And this would be literally around the corner to finishing up with the whole fellowship and getting yourself into a position where you now can get into the joint advisory partnership. So this would be part of the process so that whenever you're reaching out to clients, you can use AI Integrity Group as, your backbone to say, these are the people that I work with. This is the community that I'm involved with. We're people of integrity, transparency, and accountability, which is what we're trying to bring into every single organization that we work with as well. So the vision behind this and the passion and the type of people we want working with us are very, very important in terms of how we present ourselves. We are the people that are setting the standard, right? It's really all about setting high standards when it comes to the deployment of AI. right? And making sure that everything is done ethically. And like I said, with transparency, accountability, and honesty. As we go into session 8, which will be the final session, in this session, the idea would be to conduct the formal fast track interview. So at this stage now, I will be personally putting client in front of you, essentially allowing you to have that conversation with the client and have a final evaluation of a audited code base and looking thoroughly into the playbook execution, which is basically literally what we would have gone through in session 7, sitting down, looking at that client and basically saying to ourselves, right, how do we approach this client? Because there's so many different ways depending on what industry you're going into, what location you are. We've got our standard retainers, we've got our standard playbooks, but like I said, we may need to adjust those systems and those playbooks depending on exactly what your market looks like and the market that you're looking to try and get into, right? So we will provide you with options within our pipeline of clients and say, right, look, these are your options. We've got US based clients. We've got clients that are more interested in working with regulators. We've got clients that are more interested in working with technical engineers, right? And all of these processes are things that by that point you'll be able to do because like I said, we've created a system where the technical side of things is pretty much all automated now. There's not a lot of technical stuff that you have to do. And we've got an engineering team as well there. So even if it comes to the point where there's certain places that you potentially could get stuck technically, we can still provide you with support from one of our engineers or someone who can come in and deal with that. That's the beauty of being part of a community. What people don't realize is going into this space by yourself, trying to learn all of these processes by yourself, and then trying to go out there, find clients for yourself. Yeah, it's a process. It's taken me probably 6 months now to really be able to get to the point where, and even now, I'm not where I want to be. I know there's a lot more I can still do. There's a lot more processes I can still fine tune because the space that we're going into requires the utmost, level of professionalism, large sums of money to our clients. And if we can't justify that by turning up professionally and, being able to execute on what we've said, execute on, then ultimately we destroy the brand. Right. So this is essentially the first session, right? Session 1, onboarding and technical ingestion. So the objective of this session is to establish your dedicated TAIGA tenant workspace, ingest your active software code base, and compile an audit-ready initial risk and architecture topology map. Right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get you set up, get your workspace set up. So David, right. And then we've got the project workspace title here, which is just, an example title that we're going to use for this specific session. And then we've got me as the assigned auditor, who's going to be the lead governance auditor that's going to be mentoring you through this process as we go forward. And potentially at some point, maybe you might end up being a lead governance auditor yourself that can do these processes. So that's the goal. But yeah, we'll get there. And then, so the framework baseline selection is going to be the EU AI Act. We can pick. So depending on, what you're going to be specifically focused on, we can look at either just focusing on EU AI Act, NIST AI RMF, or ISO 42001. We're going to focus on all of them because they're all very important going into the space that we're going to be going into. And
the EU AI Act deals more with the European region. The NIST AI RF deals more with the US. I'm familiar with the ISO IC 42001. Does that focus in a particular region or what?
yes, so I'll break down ISO to you very quickly. So the ISO 42001 is essentially the world's first international standard for artificial intelligence management systems, right? It provides a structural framework for the organizations for different types of organizations, essentially to responsibly develop, provide and use AI systems. The key aspects of it are the standards, which includes AI risk management, ethical governance, and continuous system improvement. So in regards to whether it is more based around EU or America, in all honesty, it actually aligns more, I feel, with the EU AI Act rules than it does with NIST. Because why I say that is because NIST has been built for for Silicon Valley. That's what NIST was really made for, like, and Silicon Valley, I think, even rejected it very quickly. So what they've done is that I think they've taken NIST and it's only applicable in specific states. But right now in America, there's actually quite a few states that do not have any sort of regulation at all. You can go start a business, use AI there, and there's no regulation, right? So the issue then becomes, what is the point if you're starting a business and you want your business to be a global business? Because if you want your business to be a global business, the EU is a massive market, Europe is a massive, massive market. A company, let's say, for example, like Apple, if they turned around and were regulated and they decided, because AI has been regulated, we're no longer in the EU, we're no longer providing our AI services via Apple in the EU, right? They could turn around and do that, but what would be the repercussions of that? It would cause a massive backlash in terms of business for them, because they would lose a massive client base. Because obviously, AI is everyone's after the next big tech, and that's AI. Right. So if you don't have that tech on your phone or on your devices, essentially moving forward, you're going to get left behind.
True.
So what I would say is ISO it's a very, very good, system and standards in terms of aims. So when I say aims, I mean artificial intelligence management systems, right? So ISO was put in place to basically artificial intelligence management systems, right?
Right.
But I would not say it's as complete as the EU AI Act, but it definitely complements it. So in any case moving forward, regardless, I think it's good to understand all of these, all of these frameworks, because the more frameworks you understand, the more flexible you are. This is one thing about doing this mentorship. It allows you to ask questions and we can go deep, we can deep dive into specific topics. But what people don't realize is that being able to understand multiple frameworks is what sets you apart from everyone out there who's just using one framework.
True.
Right? So when you can come in and as a consultant, businesses are coming to me and they're asking me, do you use EU AI Act? Yes. What about NIST? Yes. Wow. What about ISO? Oh, yes. Okay. Because those are the well-renowned frameworks, right? But even within these frameworks don't give us an even more detailed picture of really how governance works and how governance should be working. My personal, I've sent you my white paper, and my 4-pillar framework does that. It goes further into detail of what EU AI Act has, put in place, NIST has put in place, and ISO. Because EU AI Act, one of the big factors of the EU AI Act is it requires human in the loop process. So everything at no stage within the EU AI Act, essentially, when you deploy AI, you have to be able to take accountability for that AI. There must be a human in the loop who can take accountability for what that AI does. That is a must. It is mandatory. So this is one of the reasons why this space is going to grow in terms of architecture, in terms of governance consultants, in terms of engineers, everybody, because this is one of the few spaces out there in the whole of AI, the AI market that is pushing for human beings to be added to the workflow, right? A lot of other industries are saying, no, get rid of engineers. We're fine. We've got Claude. Claude can do a better job engineering now, or what they're doing now is they're getting rid of engineers and they're hiring maybe like a chief engineer who then manages multiple agents. So instead of employing other engineers, there's only one engineer who's managing multiple AI engineers. Whereas for this space that we're going into governance is the exact opposite. This is the space where for every deployment, there must be a human in the loop. And now you can imagine in companies, for example, massive companies like your Apples, your Nikes, these Fortune 500 companies have multiple departments in multiple countries. Now imagine in every one of those departments, you can't just have one individual at the top. Every one of those departments has to have a human in the loop, the AI governance. So this space is going to grow massively. There's going to be entry-level jobs. There's going to be high-level, there's going to be high-level technical chief AI, chief governance jobs available. And once you finish this masterclass, once you're done with this whole process, you will definitely be in a position to be able to take on those high-level jobs. And I'm talking about jobs that are commanding right now 95 to 160K. That is only going to go up. As soon as an entry level comes in, as soon as entry level jobs come in, the value of the people at the top goes up. So that is only going to go up. I can see within the next maybe 2 to 3 years, chief AI officers, chief AI governance officers, lead architects, etc. We're going to be looking at like probably 200 to 300K annually for those type of jobs. So imagine if you are running your own consultancy and hiring consultants, teaching consultants, like what we're doing at the moment, and you join part of this community and grow, like the world is your oyster. Because would you rather be someone that's working for a company making 200 a year and getting taxed pretty much half of it anyway? Or would you rather have your own consultancy where you are essentially paying people 200,000 a year because you can afford to get those retainers at 500K at, who knows what amount of money at that stage. So the long term here is just the long-term value proposition of this space is just it's going to be unreal. Okay, now that we've covered that, we've set you up. The goal of this overview essentially is to establish a fellow tenant with multi-role governance access, to connect code-based repo and trigger real-time AI dependency scans, to tag processing data and model execution graph nodes, to identify unencrypted transit, missing guardrails and shadow links, and then to export the signed initial risk architecture map. So that is essentially what the goal of this first session is going to be, to get you to the point where you understand these processes.
Right.
Cool. So we move on to the next, which is code ingestion. So what we would do when it comes to the code ingestion is ideally when a customer comes on board, they are going to give you their GitHub where most of their engineers would have essentially set up a GitHub for us to have an understanding of exactly, what their pipeline looks like, what their situation looks like in terms of all the engineering processes that they've gone through within the business already in regards to their governance. So if you've read my white paper, this is part of the initial analysis, gap analysis, where we try and see, right, what's missing? What don't they have already? Because you might go into a company and that company might have governance individuals in there already, a governance consultant they're working with, but they may not necessarily have engineered what we can engineer for them. So what we need to figure out is, what have you guys built so far? What does your software stack look like? What does your hardware stack look like? And how can we come in and make that better? So by going into their GitHub, what we can do is we can run through this scanner and ingestions. This is the ingestion scanner where we can scan their GitHub and we will get results that will give us an idea of what they need.
Right.
So I'll run that scan now, and essentially what it would give us is this process here where it says ingestion telemetry complete, right? And it gives us 5 graph nodes and what was discovered, right? So based on their GitHub, we can see whether they've got OpenAI, what systems they're using. So the model configurations. So for example, here they're using OpenAI GPT-4 as their main API, right? They're also using local llama 3.7. And then we can also see their data stores. They're using Pinecone vector store and customer orders SQL. And then we can look at their dependencies, their LangChain agent tools. So this is what they're depending on in terms of their agent tools to get work done within their business. And then they're also using web scraper pipelines. And that would probably be for, let's say, something like lead gen, etc. So now once we have an idea of their code-based linking and automated source telemetry, we can now then go in and connect the repository to trigger TAIGA's deep dependency discovery engine, and we can have a look at the node graph mapping, right? So this is the mapping that it's given us. It basically breaks down the TAIGA topology module, which is each node categorized and tagged, right? So what we would go into, these are when we say nodes, right? We're basically, these are essentially the results of the code ingestion, right?
Right.
A deeper dive into the results of the code ingestion. This is where we now look into the data source. So that is where the customer orders SQL and S3 bucket lies. So this is essentially where their main data source for this company. This is where their user prompts and raw order data would be contained via their PII and all their historical transaction logs and customer IDs, right? So this is something that we can then tag the node to say, cool, we've tagged that and it's been verified. We know it exists. And then we would also look at the processing. So the Pinecone vector store, which is their RAG retrieval loop, text embedding 3 large vectors for similarity search. So this is basically their RAG retrieval loop, right? And this is how they process their data source. So once the data comes in and they've logged their data, they've got all the historical transactions, the customer IDs. At that point, they can initiate processing the data using a RAG retrieval loop. So we know they're processing their data. We can tag that. The next stage of processing would be the LangChain orchestration agent, which they're using, and the agentic tooling and routing executes autonomous tool calls to internal CRM endpoints. So that's what this LangChain orchestration agent does. And it basically tells us, right, this is what it's doing. We can tag that and say, okay, we understand that that's part of the process. And then in terms of execution now, the baseline of what they're using to execute the ingestion is OpenAI API with a direct customer context injection. So we can confirm that and we can tag the node. And then the next process would be the other execution, which is Llama. And that has been fine-tuned a fine-tuned internal model, self-hosted VLLM container running a local workstation cluster. So now we understand exactly what the topology is. Essentially, the TAIGA topology module allows this allows us to see what the topology is from the data source all the way down to execution. Once we have an understanding of all of these, we can tag the node and then we proceed to step 4. So step 4 is the baseline security, right? And at this stage, we're looking at the baseline security posture and vulnerability analysis. We can run a baseline audit by clicking here. And essentially from running this audit, we should get a result here, which shows us exactly what we would be looking at. So like I said, this is a simulation. Just to give you an example, so we don't have to waste time going through the system, basically spending another 5 minutes to 10 minutes doing a baseline audit. So once the audit comes back, this is what it will give you in terms of any vulnerabilities or what posture the situation is, right? So it tells you the first thing is we've got an unencrypted data transit in the CR. So there's raw prompts transmitted without TLS or PII scrubbing. And then at this point, we can use the software to apply a fix, or we can go manually in and apply the fix ourselves. We've also got an issue with the absence of edge guardrail injection filters. So that's something we would need to solve for them, right? And then we could do that like either through the automations, or we could go and do that manually, right? So either way, this can be solved. And then we move on to step 5. So at step 5, once we've essentially onboarded the clients and we've gone through the initial risk and architecture topology, we've looked at their topology, we've seen the baseline security issues, we can now go to the customer and say, right, this is what we've noticed in terms of, your GitHub repository or whatever they're using as a repository. This is what we've noticed. This is what we're going to bring up. You can export that audit ready topology map. So this is similar to our registry scan. It works in the same way, just without. This is a more internal than the registry scan. The registry scan it scans more of the external, what they have outside of the business in terms of their website, EU AI repositories where you're required to deposit information in regards to your company, your company's house information, all that public data. That's what the registry scanner is for. And this one is more for internal processes. So once this is done, as you can see, this is what it would look like. The TAIGA AI Governance Audit Certificate. It would show the initial risk and architecture topology for your client. So your tenant would be Apex Retail AI Core. The fellow would be yourself, David, and then the lead auditor would be myself. So this is an example. And then the active framework targets EU AI Act. It breaks down everything that it targets, so forth. And then the auditor sign-off status is passed, session 1 clearance, signed off cryptographically by lead governance auditor Ash Masoha, proceed to session 2. So essentially, this would be the process in which we would get our scan, like the registry scan. Once we've finished this, I'll go and do a registry scan for you just to show you exactly, the breakdown of what the registry scan. I don't know if you've seen one of the examples of registry scan that I've done before.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I will do a registry scan and I'll get that over to you so you can see exactly what that looks like. But essentially at this point, we would have covered everything that we need to cover, and we can now say this session is done in terms of the initial session 1, understanding the initial risk and architecture topology map. We can print out your certificate and I'll send that to you via LinkedIn or WhatsApp, and we're pretty much done with session 1. And we can now look into going into session 2. So literally that was like roughly about half an hour as well, and it's not a long process. It gets more intense as we go along, but this is the first process that you'd be required to, once you get into understanding how to deal with the company and get them set up, right? You'd need to go through this initial risk and architecture topology map. And then once you get results from this, you would do your review. You'd get an audit printed out, or an audit exported as a PDF file. And then you can send that to your client with a breakdown of exactly what the next process is.
From the little information I've seen, is this the same as carrying out a risk assessment?
So yes. So this would be the same as carrying out a risk assessment. Essentially, what this is a risk assessment is a lot more detailed, right?
Okay.
So when we're looking at carrying out risk assessments, it depends whether we're talking about carrying out a risk assessment manually or automated. Because remember, our whole vision moving forward is policy as code. We don't want you to have to spend 2 days doing a risk assessment, because when we're talking about Fortune 500 companies, trying to do a risk assessment manually is a very, very difficult process.
Right.
So ideally what we want to be doing is we want to be looking at everything that they've got an open end and what they've put into a GitHub repository. We basically get them to understand that they're going to need to put all their stuff within their business into code. They're going to need to turn it into some sort of code or some sort of data that we can access to understand exactly how they run everything within their business. So that is why we use GitHub, because GitHub allows that company to be able to turn essentially their whole business into code and break it down into code. They can put that then into a GitHub repository, and they should have engineers who can do this for them. If they don't, then we can assign an engineer who can do all of this for them, which just raises the cost of, the service that we're offering to them. And then essentially we can build a GitHub. We can turn their business into essentially code so that we can read it in code and we can deal with the problems in code.
Right.
Because ideally, whatever they're doing with AI is in code anyway. Every AI process that they are going through within their company is being done in code. So why isn't your policy being done in code? This is where the gap is right now in the market when it comes to governance and implementation of governance. Most governance architects, most governance consultants are doing these things manually, and it's taking them months. Your average consultant right now, it takes them 8 months to do just an audit.
Wow.
You know, they're saying roughly between, actually, it's not even 8, it's 12 to 18 months, depending on the size of the company, right? So yeah, for small businesses and small companies, this may be something that can be done quickly, manually. That I do not deny. Yes, for small businesses. But we're not trying to work with small businesses. We're trying to go for companies that are making over at least 1 million. You know, over at least 1 million, if not, you know, at least 10 million, right? We're trying to go for the big boys because the big boys are the ones who are going to pay the big money.
Yes.
Right. So, so when we're looking at the big boys, we're looking at one company alone may have possibly even up to 50 departments. Or 50 locations, whichever you want to call it. And each location is going to have its own, you know, its own individual consultant that needs to go through that location, understand exactly what data they have, turn their data into code. We read the code and understand exactly where they're lacking in terms of their risk and architecture topology. Then we can now put something together for them to turn around and say, right, this is where your issues are, and this is how we can resolve your issues.
Awesome.
So I mean, I think you've pretty much got a picture of essentially what we're trying to do moving forward. We're trying to make this as simple and straightforward and as least technical as possible. We want this to be something that doesn't require someone with who has to come in and be extremely technical, because we understand that the more technical this is, the harder then it is to explain to the client.
Right.
You know? And it's a good question that you asked in regards to, okay, so who then explains this to the client? It's a good question. And the answer to that question is you. They're not going to have someone in the company who's already understands these processes and governance, or else they wouldn't need us. So the person whose job it is to now go back and relay this information via, you know, emails, whether it needs to be done through Zoom call, whether it needs to be whichever way you've agreed to communicate with that client, because every client is different. Right? Some clients aren't easily available for Zoom calls whenever and whenever. So they prefer to be contacted via emails. So it would be about breaking it down to them within an email and saying, right, this is your risk topology. This is the situation. If you want to explain it in more detail, we can get on a call and I can break it all down to you. The people that they may have within the company, they may be able to look at this and understand it, is their engineers. The engineers may be able to say, okay, yeah, I completely understand what this is about and what they're saying. And yeah, this is the next process. This is what we're going to need to do. And then they can tick it off on their end and say, okay, cool, we understand this. But ideally, they're hiring you to come in as that person who basically deals with everything for them, explains everything to them, and basically breaks it down to them, because you're going to be on retainer, remember?
Right.
So this isn't something, or if you're not on retainer, you're going to be on an hourly. People are going to be consulting you on an hourly basis. So literally you might even be needing to do this live in some cases, because that's what I've had to do. With some clients, I've literally had to go live with them on Zoom and go through processes with them. But but at that time, I'm charging them 800 US to 1,000 US an hour for my time.
Right.
So regardless of whichever way they want to go around the processes, we are flexible. And by the time we finish these sessions, you'll be more than capable of doing these conversations and Zoom calls and putting out highly detailed emails that basically break everything down.
I'm scared.
It's serious stuff. It's serious stuff. You know, and obviously with these clients, before we even get to this process, once we've, you know, had the conversations with them and they fully understand what we're going to come in and do, and we've signed contracts, we've signed NDAs, we've signed a lot of paperwork. So we can't afford to get anything wrong, because that falls back on us.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
So yeah, it is scary at the start. It is something that, you know, but trust me when I say I will make sure that by the time you need to be in front of clients, you're fully prepared and yeah, you'll be more than confident enough to get the job done.
That would be great. That would be great.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to print the certificate for this first part, just to say that you've completed it, and I'll send that over to you via WhatsApp. and then tomorrow we can get started with session 2.
Good. So to have access to this,
Yes.
so that
Yes.
I can
Another
go
thing
through
is,
it again and all that. Yeah.
Yes. So I'll send you a copy of this recording. It will take probably about half an hour for the whole recording to upload onto my PC. And then once it's ready, I'll send you this recording tonight so you can go over it whenever you need to go over it.
Right. Then the site itself, the TAIGA.
Okay, so yeah, with TAIGA at the present moment, you can access TAIGA via my website. So if you go on the website, there should be an option that says access TAIGA, and you can go straight on there right now. You can get access to TAIGA, and you can go through everything that you need to go through. Some of the areas on TAIGA are locked because of licensing that's required. But you can actually go on there and run a TAIGA registry. So you can scan, what I would suggest you do next is just go on there and try scanning a couple of businesses, maybe local to your area. Just put those businesses into the scanner, the registry scanner. It will bring up it will bring up all the information, and then you can print that out or see that as as an audit report. And then, that should kind of give you an idea of the auditing process. And then,
Sounds good.
Perfect. Appreciate your time once again today. I know it's been difficult because of the time difference that we have.
Time difference. Yes.
Yeah, but it's all good. We'll always make a plan.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate your time and the accommodation too.
You're more than welcome. I look forward to tomorrow's session, or whenever you're ready next, just let me know, because like I said, no pressure.
Sure. I'll let you know. I'm gonna chat you up and I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. Enjoy your afternoon, I guess, down there. It's evening for me now here. It's almost 8 o'clock. So yeah, we'll catch up tomorrow.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.